It always began the same way, an ordinary night shattered by a sound that didn't belong. A creak at the window. The shuffle of footsteps where none should be. For families across California in the 1970s, these small intrusions were the start of a nightmare. The intruder moved like a ghost, slipping in and out of homes, leaving terror in his wake. Women were tied, assaulted, and threatened. Husbands were forced to lie helpless, dishes stacked on their backs, warned that a single sound would mean death. For years, he had no face. He was the East Area Rapist in Sacramento, the original Night Stalker in Southern California. It took decades before investigators realized these horrors were the work of one man, and even longer before his mask was ripped away. Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, a man sworn to protect. A man who lived as a father, a neighbor, a husband by day, and as a predator by night. This is the true story of how power disguised as trust fell to persistence, science, and the voices of those once silenced. The underdogs of this story were the survivors. One of the earliest was Jane Carson Sandler, attacked in 1976 while her young child slept nearby. Bound and terrified, she survived, but when she told her story, she was met with skepticism. In an era when victims were often doubted or silenced, Jane's trauma was reduced to whispers. To Joseph DeAngelo, she was just another name to erase. But Jane refused to vanish. She gave detailed testimony, pushing investigators to take her case seriously. She kept speaking when others tried to quiet her. What DeAngelo underestimated was the endurance of his victims. They carried their scars not as weakness, but as fuel for the fight that would one day expose him. Between 1974 and 1986, DeAngelo committed crimes on a scale rarely seen in American history. At least 13 murders, over 50 rapes, more than 100 burglaries. He stalked neighborhoods in Sacramento, Contra Costa, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Orange counties. He studied his victims, learning their routines. Sometimes, he broke into their homes days in advance, leaving ropes or tools behind. The attacks followed a haunting ritual. Victims recalled his harsh whisper, his heavy breathing, the cold precision of his threats. Husbands and boyfriends were tied and humiliated, forced to hear the assaults they were powerless to stop. And then the killings began. The violence escalated until families were slaughtered in their homes. California lived in paralyzing fear. Perhaps the cruelest twist was who DeAngelo really was. At the time of his earliest assaults, he was a police officer. In 1973, he joined the Exeter Police Department, later transferring to Auburn, near Sacramento. He patrolled the same streets he terrorized, attended meetings where his crimes were discussed, and absorbed investigative tactics designed to catch him. When his colleagues searched for the East Area Rapist, DeAngelo was already in the room, hidden in plain sight. In 1979, he was fired, not for violence, but for shoplifting dog repellent and a hammer. A seemingly small disgrace, but with chilling irony, both items were tools he had used in his crimes. Even stripped of his badge, he continued, escalating into murder. Then, in 1986, his reign abruptly ended. For reasons still debated, he stopped. But he was never caught. For 30 years, survivors lived with scars and unanswered questions. Families of the murdered grieved in silence, their cases cold. Detectives retired or died with the mystery unsolved. But the victims never stopped pushing. Journalists wrote. Communities remembered. And new generations of investigators refused to let the trail go cold forever. In the early 2000s, advances in DNA connected the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, proving they were one man. The press renamed him the Golden State Killer. Yet his identity remained hidden. Until 2018. The breakthrough came through forensic genealogy, a technique never before used in such a high-profile case. Investigators uploaded DNA from crime scenes into public genealogy databases, searching not for DeAngelo directly but for relatives. Slowly, a family tree emerged. At the center was Joseph James DeAngelo, living quietly in Citrus Heights. A grandfather, a retired mechanic, a man who seemed utterly ordinary. Detectives collected DNA from his discarded trash and a car door handle. When the lab confirmed the match, the decades-long silence broke. The underdogs, the victims, the survivors, the families, were about to see justice. On April 24, 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested outside his home. Neighbors watched in shock as the quiet man they knew as Joe was led away in handcuffs. The courtroom scenes that followed were unlike any in American history. Survivors and families stood before him, telling their stories. Their voices, once silenced, became thunder. Some spoke with fury, others with grief, some with forgiveness. All carried strength. DeAngelo, once the terror of California, now sat hunched in a wheelchair, whispering, "I admit," as charges were read. In August 2020, he was sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. He will die in prison. The Golden State Killer's story is one of arrogance. A man who believed his badge and his cunning made him untouchable, who thought fear would silence his victims forever. But fear does not last. The persistence of survivors like Jane Carson Sandler, the determination of detectives across generations, and the power of science shattered his illusion of invincibility. The lesson is clear: never underestimate the silenced. Never dismiss the powerless. Justice may stumble. It may take decades, but truth endures. And when it rises, it crushes even the mightiest masks. DeAngelo's conviction closed one of the darkest chapters in California's history, but his story left an unsettling question behind. If a man sworn to protect could commit such atrocities while hiding in plain sight for decades, how many others, still cloaked in power and authority, remain unseen?